Good evening. I'm Francis Chiava, the co-president of the Cleveland Peace Action Education Fund. We're proud to sponsor tonight's program, Dealing Effectively with Iran Without War. Peace Action has long stood on the proposition that, in this day and age, if peace, stability, and democracy are the goals, then war does not work. So what can work? Ongoing dialogues that bridge differences between nations and between and among communities of people right here in Ohio. Our Middle East Peace Committee has striven in recent years to create dialogues about controversial issues and difficult questions that have divided people. It's in this same spirit that the Middle East Peace Committee has organized tonight's program. My thanks to the committee, and in particular, Doug Kerr. If you, Doug, where are you? Doug Kerr, Norman Robbins, David Berenson, and Alan Fetterman, who has the camera there. Tonight we seek dialogue as a means to avoid a potentially disastrous war involving Israel, the U.S., and Iran. We are most grateful to our two distinguished speakers, Peter Beinart and Jamal Abdi, for their willingness to come and participate in this dialogue. I'd like to thank our many donors who answered the call, without whom we would not be here this evening. And thank you all for coming to be part of the dialogue. And there will be time for that. I'd like to recognize, we do have a representative from Senator Sherrod Brown's office. And I'm not sure if there are other representatives of elected officials. If there are, please make yourself known. After the program, please join us for continued discussion and light refreshments in the front hall. Peter will be signing copies of his book. If you'd like to be more involved with Peace Action and our work on Middle East peace or any other aspect of our work, or if you'd like to participate in or schedule with your group further facilitated dialogues on this or other issues, you'll find a sign-up sheet in the front hall by the front door. And finally, I'd like to thank Siegel College of Judaic Studies for hosting this program. Now let me introduce our gracious host and moderator for the evening, Siegel College Provost, Brian Hamcroft. Brian's recent book, Between Home and Homeland, Youth Aliyah from Nazi Germany, was published by the University of Alabama Press. He is currently completing a study of 21st century Jewish life in America. Brian Hamcroft.
Thank you, Francis. And please, let us know if you can't hear, but I think we'd like to stay comfortable and to grab the mics. I want to thank Cleveland Peace Action for organizing this program, and it's our pleasure to provide a venue for an important public dialogue and discussion. I want to talk a little bit about the format and then introduce our speakers, and we'll get right to it. We're going to give each of our speakers a few minutes, 10 to 12 minutes, to provide some opening statements about their position and their ideas and thoughts on this matter. We'll then break from that format, and I'll facilitate the dialogue a little bit between them. They can bounce off what one another has said. At which point, when that is complete, we will allow the opportunity for those of you who have questions to have those questions posed. The format we're using this evening is that we have handed out, or if you haven't received one yet, please raise your hands and someone can give it to you, index cards. We ask that you write the questions down the index card, raise your hand with the card, and then someone will collect it, and then those questions will be brought up to the stage, and we'll present them to our panelists. And then we'll let that dialogue go, really, for as long as we can. The entire program will be about 90 minutes. And then, as I said, we'll go for some refreshments, and Peter will sign his books. We're pleased to welcome back to Cleveland. Peter Beinart was here a couple of years ago under the auspices of the college. He is an associate professor at the City University of New York, writer for the Daily Beast, and his latest book, The Crisis of Zion, Crisis of Zionism, and the name of the new blog you got,
Open Zion.
Is Open Zion. So you might not have seen that in the bio, and some interesting ideas coming out of there. And on my right, Jamal Abdi, Policy Director of the National Iranian American Council, as a frequent guest contributor at NPR and the Huffington Post and the BBC. So really, we have experts on different subject matters, but really coming together to give some perspectives on dealing effectively with Iran without war. So I don't think we actually had a coin toss, but I'll just tell you the sheet that I have. Jamal, you're up first.
All right. Okay, so can you all hear me from here? Do I need to lean over? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you to Peace Action for having me. Just so you all know, I'm the Policy Director of the National Iranian American Council. I get to work in D.C. Educating policymakers about U.S.-Iran relations and what are the preferred policies to deal with Iran to address the many issues that we have with the Iranian government, including the nuclear program, including human rights. And so I'm glad to be here and to tell you a little bit about sort of what is the current state of play regarding Iran. Obviously, we're here to talk about how do we prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, and how do we do that without war. And I'll just say from the outset, there is no military solution to this problem. If you go down the line and you talk to every official at the Pentagon, military officials, intelligence officials in the United States and in Israel, they'll all agree that there is no military solution. We can't bomb away the knowledge that Iran has obtained regarding the enrichment of uranium, regarding nuclear development. It's not possible. There's one scenario that has been outlined, and that would involve a ground invasion of Iran. It would require 700,000 U.S. troops. It would require at least 100,000 Allied troops to basically occupy the country and dismantle its nuclear facilities. This would come at an enormous cost, and frankly, given the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan, it's not something that is feasible and would make the last decade of war look like a cakewalk. So when we talk about military options, what we're talking about is limited strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. This would be a bombing campaign carried out by Israel and the United States, and all this would do is delay Iran's nuclear program. At best, we could expect that a bombing campaign could set Iran's program back by 3 years, during which time Iran could reconstitute its nuclear program and its enrichment activities. Now, before we even go down that road, we do need to understand where is Iran's nuclear program. We hear a lot of rhetoric about the threat of Iran, and I think much of it is founded, but there are some basic facts that we need to understand. First and foremost, Iran has a nuclear enrichment program, but it doesn't yet have a nuclear weapons program. This is a fact that has been, or an assessment that has been repeated by the Secretary of Defense, and again, the same group of officials in the United States and Israel. There has not yet been a decision by Iran to take its enrichment program and move towards building a nuclear weapon. What we're talking about right now is what is viewed as a nuclear hedging strategy by Iran, where they are pursuing a civilian enrichment. They're enriching uranium up to 3.5%, which is the grade that you would need for energy purposes. And they are basically, if they continue down this road, if we do nothing and they continue to do what they've been doing, they would get to a point where if they decided to, if they made the political decision to build a nuclear weapon, they could do so within a limited amount of time. Where they currently stand, and Leon Panetta was just on 60 Minutes on Sunday and made it very clear, where they currently stand is if they made that decision, it would take them 1 year to basically produce a crude device, and then 2 to 3 years to actually put that onto a warhead and have a deliverable nuclear weapon. So we're talking, as soon as they make that decision, that's when the clock starts, and we're still looking at 3 years. So while none of us want to see a nuclear-armed Iran, we need to understand that that's not necessarily imminent, and it's not a decision that has been made yet. And in order to effectively deal with this problem, we need to not get caught up in false choices that are driven by this sense of an imminent threat. We need to deal with this in the most rational manner possible and not get sucked into a debate of a nuclear-armed Iran versus war with Iran. That's just not a debate that we're at yet. There's still an option of dealing with this through diplomacy. So where we are right now is that for the first time, really ever in the history of the current Iranian regime, of the last 3 decades, for the first time ever, we have a diplomatic process in place. We actually, over the course of the last 3 months, we finally have met the Iranians at the table, brought them to the table, and negotiated regarding their nuclear program. The most immediate goal that we have is for Iran to end the most problematic or the most provocative elements of its enrichment program. So Iran is now enriching up to 20%. In order to get to a weapons grade, they would need to enrich up to 90%. What we want them to do is to end that enrichment at 20% and scale that back down to a level that is more in keeping with the civilian program. That's the most immediate step, because in doing that, we extend that window of time that Iran would need in order to build a nuclear weapon if they chose to. In order to do that, though, we do have to be mindful of what is the ultimate goal here. And so I think this is something we can probably get into a little bit more in the question and answer and maybe in the back and forth. But there's really a question of, can we live with Iran that has a nuclear program, but that is under strict inspections, where the IAEA has unfettered access to their facilities, and where basically they would not be able to make a sprint towards a nuclear weapon? Or are we going to demand that Iran has no enrichment program, but little verification of that fact? And what I would argue, and I think what a lot of the folks in the in the Obama administration and within a lot of the national security circles would argue, is that it's better to have verification. It's better to, if Iran has a program, to have tight inspections instead of to demand that they have zero enrichment. The problem with zero enrichment is it's more desirable that there be no enrichment in Iran, but the Iranians are not going to take that step. And in making that our demand, basically putting forward a non-starter for negotiations, we're making the perfect the enemy of the good. Because Iran, as a signatory to the NPT, does have a right to a civilian nuclear program, and most experts agree that that does mean they have a right to enrich uranium. So what we need to do is figure out a way that we can, whether it's through sanctions or negotiations or however we can, to put those inspections in place so that we can guarantee that Iran would not be able to break out and build a nuclear weapon. I think this is the crux of the issue right now, and it's sort of where the debate is going to fall, because in the past it's been a debate of, do we talk to the Iranians or do we sanction them? And for the first 3 years of the Obama administration, we sanctioned them, with the idea being that we create more leverage to bring them to the table. Now the debate is, what is this diplomacy going to look like? What are our end goals? And the problem that we have right now is that there's been an ultimatum posed on this issue of enrichment. We have Congress basically pressuring the Obama administration to demand this zero enrichment principle. This is the same demand that the Bush administration had throughout its tenure, and it makes negotiations impossible. And so what I would argue is that we need to utilize these negotiations to pursue an inspections-based solution and to understand that there really is no military solution that would end Iran's program. Just very briefly, I think I might be going over on my time, but I do want to talk about the military option and why it would actually be detrimental to what we're trying to achieve here. The military option would effectively, it would guarantee all but guarantee that which we're trying to prevent. If Iran was bombed, the debate within the Iranian political system would veer in favor of hardliners and would justify those who may believe that Iran does need a nuclear weapon. That decision that has not been made yet about whether they build one or not, that decision would be all but decided if Iran was bombed by US or Israel. Iran would likely kick out the IAEA, the UN's inspections team. They would kick them out. We would have no eyes on the ground. We wouldn't know what's going on. And a lot of people don't realize this, but there actually are inspectors on the ground right now that oversee Iran's program. We'd like for them to have more access, and that's what we're trying to do. But for the time being, they are there. Iran would use an attack as an excuse to kick them out. It would likely reconstitute its activities, and as I said before, within as long as 3 years, possibly as short as 1 year, would reconstitute a program and would likely make a dash towards actually building the nuclear weapon that we're trying to prevent them from acquiring. It also would have a great effect inside of Iran for the democracy and human rights movement. Now, today is actually, it's the 3-year anniversary of June 12, 2009, the disputed Iran elections, in which we saw the Iranian people come out into the street by the millions to protest a fraudulent election and to demand their civil rights, to demand a government that actually represented them and respected their, was pluralistic and respected their values. We saw that those protests were stifled through violence and repression. The human rights situation in Iran continues to be a matter of great concern that, frankly, has only escalated over time. If we go to war with Iran, the hopes that that movement, the democracy movement, would be able to achieve their goal would be completely devastating. Within Iran, the situation would become even more militarized than it is today. Democracy and human rights activists would